As a singer, songwriter, and loving husband Dave Grohl once said, "There goes my hero." No one really knew what he was referring to at the time, and it would actually take almost 30 years to learn the answer. But yeah, now we know. It's over, man. Apologies if I sound a bit weird. I'm recovering from an illness, but I finished My Hero Academia today, and I'm very eager to talk about it. A video that was a long time in the making. It's one I promised I would do ever since I started this channel. The series had been like in a state of being almost over for a very long time, but now I have read the full thing, and I have some thoughts, man. For those who have not followed me for a while, I have a very long history with this series. Not only is it a significant series for me, but it was a significant series for the manga industry as a whole, specifically in the West. The impact that this thing had on manga sales in the late 2010s, you go into a Barnes & Noble or Chapters these days, and you'll notice that the manga section is gigantic, usually far bigger than the graphic novel section. It never used to be like that. It was thanks to series like My Hero Academia, which in terms of manga outsold literally everything else in the West, that paved the way for the eventual boom we would see during COVID. You know, My Hero is no longer the most successful manga in the West, but it was for quite some time, and there were a lot of factors contributing to that. Of course, it was a fast-paced and accessible battle manga, which battle manga fans flocked to. But it came out at such the perfect time. All of pop culture was experiencing a huge superhero boom. This series definitely capitalized on that, and it became a significant gateway manga for a lot of new readers. It was definitely helped by the anime adaptation as well. Though I did get into the series a little bit before its gigantic boost in popularity. In fact, this one volume here came out in August 2015, which is when I bought it, and that was the month I turned 17. And the series as a whole came to an end this August, where I turned 26. Though to clarify, it did start a year before in Japan. 2015 is just when the volume started releasing in the West. But right from the start, I was really hooked on this series. I was a big fan of manga. It was all I was reading in those days. And I followed it pretty religiously for many years. In fact, I only really stopped in the past couple of years when the final arc started, and I sort of wanted to wait for it all to end. But yeah, I religiously followed the weekly updates, I religiously followed the anime for a time. I sort of fell off the anime when the quality started to waver. But yeah, that's my background with the series, and once it ended, I decided to go all the way back to the beginning, read the whole thing through, see if it still holds up, see how the ending went, and see how well it, plays as this complete series, now without the context of having to read weekly for years and years and years. And years and years. So for those who are completely unaware about the series, it follows our main guy here, Izuku Midoriya, who lives in a superhero society where most people are born with superpowers. Some much stronger than others, and those individuals often want to be superheroes, so they'll take a hero course in high school and, learn to be pro-heroes. The problem with Midoriya is that he is a rare case who was born without a power. In this world, the powers are known as quirks. That is until one day when All Might, a pro-hero and one of Midoriya's personal heroes, witnesses Midoriya perform a selfless act, and All Might, whose strength is failing, decides that this kid might be the one he can pass on his powers to. This is the story about how Midoriya becomes the world's greatest hero. But it's not gonna be easy. All Might gives him this super strength power of his, but Midoriya's a bit of a wet noodle, so he's gotta undergo some intense training. He goes to school, he meets all the classmates, he's got friends, he's got rivals. But as this hero society is growing, as you would expect, villains are on the rise as well. And they are here to, of course, make sure that Midoriya's Hero Academia does not go as smoothly as he wanted. So this is a pure shonen battle manga. If you're unfamiliar with how these normally work, they are often split into several smaller story arcs that all work together to tell the overall narrative. And with My Hero, you normally have two categories of these. You have the school-related story arcs, which involve Midoriya, who takes the hero name of Deku, and all of his classmates in this hero course as they learn and train to become heroes. So there's a whole bunch of school activities and festivals and tournaments, all sorts of fun opportunities for them to develop their skills. Then you also have story arcs that are more battle focused with higher stakes, usually involving attacks from villains. And My Hero's formula, especially at the beginning, I find to be very interesting and very smart. This is a series that when you read it, you can understand Horikoshi, had so many inspirations. Obviously other battle manga, American superhero comics and stories, stories, and stuff like Star Wars, they all play a huge role in this narrative that Horikoshi has crafted. Horikoshi is the author, if you didn't grasp that. The series uses its familiarity to sort of ease you into things and to feel like comfort food. It reminds you of a lot of things you love, so you sort of feel at home here. But of course, then it would risk feeling too familiar. And thankfully, what Horikoshi does here is he often uses, all of these tropes and more familiar things that are happening to sort of lull you into a false sense of security. But then he sort of pulls the rug out from under you and does some really interesting things with a lot of the concepts he's playing with. The story will often go in very unexpected directions. There will be some crazy twists. He's really keeping you on your toes. This is a series that pays homage to and respects, a lot of the classic tropes of the genres, but does enough fresh stuff and has enough of a unique identity to not make it feel stale. One of the things I think exemplifies this is just everyone's superpower here, because most of the superpowers in this story are similar to things that you have seen before, but they all have very interesting quirks. Yeah, okay. For example, Midoriya has super strength, okay? The most basic superpower you can think of. But the twist is that Midoriya can only use this power at the great expense of his body, which adds a whole new dynamic to how he uses it and how he fights. There's a lot of strategy he has to employ, which takes a basic power and makes it far more interesting. His main, bully and rival, Bakugo, also has a very unique power. It's essentially he can just create explosions, but the way they explain it and the way he develops it was so fascinating. Another standout is one of the strongest students at the school, Mirio, who can become permeable and phase through objects. But the way they go about explaining the different mechanics of these powers and how these students have to, overcome challenges and grow them was easily some of the most interesting stuff about this series. I love how they all, get to design unique costumes and get different gadgets, which help to enhance their abilities. I love the whole mythology and mechanics of the quirks, how they basically work like muscles, and the more they use them, the better you get at them. It allows for a very natural sense of power progression, and this whole power system is easily one of the standouts of the series. Now, there are a lot of characters in this series. An absurd amount of characters. There's so many. And while this does lead to issues that I will be talking about, I do think that overall, the way that he is able to give so many characters unique and interesting abilities is really commendable. And the way he weaves them all throughout his story was very impressive. It was always fun seeing, different students with different powers come together, see how they synergize with their allies, how they go up against villains. And an advantage of having such a large cast with interesting powers is that when Horikoshi, sits down to write a story arc, to write battles, he'd think, okay, which characters, which powers would be good to have against this villain? Yep, I could sure use that power. It's a good thing I have 300 characters to choose from that I can just pull in and stick into a battle. And the best arcs for sure are the ones that focus on a smaller core group of characters, because Horikoshi also has a lot of skill on the character front. There are some really strong standouts here. Midoriya gets a lot of hate, and I've never really understood it. Sure, he's not the most interesting character around. He is a bit bland, but I think he's serviceable. I think he does the job as the protagonist of the series. And I do genuinely think that his quirk, the fact that he has to, damage his body every time he fights, does add a lot to you becoming attached to him, and makes the feats that he achieves in this series all the more impressive. His rival, Bakugo, was a fantastic character, easily one of the best developed throughout the series. I mentioned Mirio before. He's also a fantastic character. There's far too many characters. I can't name them all. There's a lot of great villains, a lot of great heroes. But the standout, my goat of this series, is easily Endeavor. Endeavor is the father of Todoroki, one of Midoriya's classmates, and he is one of the top pro heroes. He's a very minor character at first, but as the series goes on, we start to learn a lot more about him and his family, and yikes. Yes, while Endeavor is my goat, he's a horrible person. Okay, he is a wife and child abuser. Uh-oh. But the way he changes throughout the series and the way he tries to atone for what he did while knowing it's unforgivable, it was so, far above anything else in the series in terms of writing quality. Pretty much every time the story focused a lot on the Todoroki family, it was baller. It was, was fire. And now, here's the thing with all of these characters. I do actually think it was a remarkable achievement how well balanced the cast sometimes is. Especially in, like, the more school-related arcs, where we just have so many students. There's so many students. Horikoshi does a decent job showing them all off in equal measure. And he does like to show all of the students off. Often. But the problem with this is you can only do so much with the time you have. This is a decently long series, but it's very hard to justify a cast this large. If you just look at Midoriya's homeroom, which is just 20 characters, only like a small fraction of the whole cast. Only like half of them end up being interesting or important. So all the time we spend on the other half, the D-listers I like to call them, there's like Sugar Boy, Tail Boy, the guy who can speak to animals, of course, Mineta, who's just a horrendous pervert character with no redeemable qualities at all, and his quirk is stupid as well. The worst parts from like the first 2/3 of this series are always the arcs where we get a lot of focus on all the extra characters who you simply just don't care about. Again, I think the series was like this because Horikoshi wanted a large pool of powers to play with, but I think that really came at the cost of the series losing a lot of focus at certain points. And this is just Midoriya's class, okay? There was a whole other hero course class of 20 other students, and you have other students from other years and other courses at this school. You have other hero schools. You have all of the teachers who are heroes. You have all the other pro heroes who all have their agencies and all of their assistants. You have the civilian characters. Of course, you have all of the villains and the multiple factions of them. It's a lot, and it is often too much. I do commend Horikoshi for balancing a lot of it well, and the fact that, several characters come out being really fantastic is great. But yeah, you really didn't need Sugar Boy in here. And you're saying, well, okay, you take out all the nonsense characters, well, what could he have filled that empty space with? Another kind of big issue I have with this series is how it handles its world building. Now, on paper, Horikoshi has crafted a really cool and interesting world here, a superpowered society, lots of different elements to it, lots of avenues to explore social commentary, and just really cool ways the world adapted. But I don't often like how all of this information is presented to us, where we often really aren't introduced to big aspects of this world until they become relevant to the story, which leaves things feeling a bit small. For example, it takes us a very long time to meet like any other students outside of our main classes. The fact that it took so long to meet like the top strongest students at their school was so odd to me. Like, you think this would be at least something that they could mention in passing. We could at least see these characters around just to make this world feel a bit bigger. We learned that a lot of pro heroes have their own agencies, but again, this concept is not actually introduced until the students, get work terms to go to these agencies. Like, this feels like basic world building stuff we should have already known. And for sure, the most egregious example of this, I think, is when they finally decide to focus on other parts of the world, not just Japan. And the way Horikoshi handles heroes from other countries was laughable, honestly. We only see one hero from America, and she is literally just the American flag. That's her whole thing. We see one hero from Egypt, and they are just dressed like a pharaoh. Because Egypt, do you get it? It felt so shoehorned in and underdeveloped. But I do want to say that while I am heavily critical of, the amount of characters and its world building, I think overall this is still a really enjoyable series. And despite some of the flaws I think it has, I think, overall it's very fast-paced, it's very exciting, easy to follow. It's just an overall really good time. But I haven't talked about the final arc yet. Now, it's very common for a long-running battle manga to end with this giant war arc that then they try to tie everything together, and it often results in kind of a mess. So, countless battle manga have gone down this path, and unfortunately, I do not think My Hero avoided this fate, as the final arc in this story is absolutely a mess. To its credit, it is far from the worst final arc I've ever read. And it does have some standout moments, involving a lot of the characters that I thought were really great. Horikoshi wanted to create this gigantic spectacle, give fans everything they wanted, and I think he somewhat delivers. But the main issue with this arc is that the two major problems I have with the series come out in full force and cause issues like they never have before. In previous Giant Battle and War arcs, we are still sort of focused on a core cast of characters, but here is where Horikoshi thinks we have to give a big moment to literally everybody, which results in just an insane barrage of characters who we don't care about constantly showing up, having their little battle, having their big epic moment. And it also brings world building issues because there are really odd parts of this arc that sort of just pivot away from the main action to focus on other parts of Hero Society, issues they are facing, which are all interesting ideas, but it's so baffling to be just shoehorned into the final arc like they are. It's like he had so many more ideas for the series he didn't get a chance to do, so he just sort of all crams it into this big, giant, jumbled mess. That is exciting, it is at times entertaining, but it is also extremely frustrating. It's hard to say this is the worst arc in the series, because I do think there's definitely some more boring parts earlier on, but while I did think the ending was cute and fitting in a few ways, it was overall definitely a big disappointment, especially for a series that I have been following for so long. And I hate to end it on that note, but that's how it goes sometimes, man. I definitely still have a lot of respect for this series, and while, not everything might have came together perfectly in the end, it is overall still a really entertaining ride with so much creativity on display. I haven't mentioned Horikoshi's art style yet. I love it. The dude is a fantastic illustrator. There are some whack character designs, but so many of them are memorable. The way he draws action is really great. It's always just a lot of eye candy here. It's really a joy to read, even when it's, not quality-wise the greatest. And whatever he decides to do next, I will definitely be sure to follow it. So in the end, would I recommend this series? Yes, for sure, especially if you're a battle manga fan and you have not experienced it yet. Why not? But at the same time, as a whole, definitely better stuff you could be reading. And if you have read My Hero and you're a fan, or maybe you were disappointed by the ending, definitely read Hunter x Hunter. If you haven't, it's probably the best shonen battle manga has to offer. And I think Magi, The Labyrinth of Magic, which is about the same length as My Hero, is super underrated. Definitely worth checking out. People like scores. I'll give My Hero a 3.5 out of 5. Even though I am now about to sell all of these and make a ton of money, I will for sure remember this series very fondly. Thank you all so much for watching. You can leave your thoughts on this series, anything manga related, in the comments down below. Let me know what you thought of it all, how it wrapped up. And enough of this weeb shit, okay? It's time for the fall TBR next. I was very bad keeping up with my goals in the summer, so I'm hopefully going to be fixing that.